I know people lie on the internet all the time, especially when it comes to creepy stories. Clickbait headlines, fake videos, photoshopped shadows in the background, it's all been done. But I swear to you, right now with everything I've got, this really happened. There was no circus the day before, and the moment I received the ticket, I should have thrown it away. Maryville's a small town, not the kind of small where you just smile and wave to your neighbors when you take the trash out. I mean the kind of small where your neighbors know exactly what time you leave for work, how many spoonfuls of sugar you put in your coffee, and the exact day your cousin's kid is graduating, even if they live 2 towns over. It's one of those places where news spreads faster than the actual event. If someone gets pulled over, the whole town knows by lunchtime. If a dog goes missing, there's already flyers stapled to the telephone poles and concerned neighbors knocking on doors before the sun even dips. We don't get visitors, we don't get events, we don't get anything, really. So when I was walking down Main Street just after 6 in the morning to open up my bakery and saw a big red circus tent at the far end of the field past the gas station, I stopped walking. I just stood there, staring like my brain needed an extra minute to make sense of it. It was massive, tall and round, with a pointed top and flapping golden flags. The fabric was a bright red, the kind you don't usually see in real life. It didn't look weathered or dusty or old. It looked like someone took a movie set and dropped it there overnight. But that was the thing. It hadn't been there yesterday. I stared for maybe a minute, then forced myself to keep walking. The sourdough wasn't going to knead itself. I unlocked the door to the bakery and slipped inside, flipping on the lights and tying on my apron. The warm scent of flour and yeast greeted me like usual. For a while I focused on the dough, shaping loaves and prepping the cinnamon buns for the oven. By 7:30, the first regulars were already walking in. Miss Hoover came in first, like she always did. She's in her 70s, with tightly curled white hair and this smile that always looks like she just heard a sweet secret. She gets the same thing every time, a loaf of sourdough and a cinnamon bun, but only if they're still warm. She walked in a little more cheerful than usual that morning, practically humming. "Did you see the circus?" she asked, not even halfway to the counter. I wiped my hands on a towel and looked up. "I saw the tent," I said, "but I don't know anything about it." "There were no flyers," she said, peering around as if they might appear in the display case. "No announcements, no notice in the paper." She laughed softly and leaned in like it was some kind of miracle. "My grandkids are coming this weekend," she said. "Wouldn't it be something fun for them? Something exciting? Nothing ever happens in Maryville anymore." Before I could answer, a voice cut in from the corner table. "Hank. He's another regular. Comes in at the same time every day, orders 1 black coffee and a biscuit, no butter, never butter, and sits by the window in the far seat where he can see the street." He didn't even look up when he spoke. "Susan," he said, chewing slowly, "you ever seen something appear in this town overnight?" Miss Hoover rolled her eyes and turned around to face him. "Oh, Hank, don't start. You're always so grumpy." "I'm serious," he said. "That circus is up to no good." She waved him off, smiling like she was indulging a cranky uncle at Thanksgiving. "Thank you, dear," she said to me as I handed her the loaf and the bun. "You have a good morning." She walked out with a little bounce in her step, but I was still thinking about what Hank said. Because he wasn't wrong. Things don't just appear in Maryville. A whole circus doesn't show up overnight with no warning, no flyers, no trucks, no noise. It didn't sit right. That night, after cleaning the bakery and locking up, I walked home the same way I always did. But as I neared the field again, I heard it. Music. Not loud, not blaring, but that unmistakable melody, cheerful and upbeat, with the kind of rhythm you only ever hear at a circus. It sounded old, too, like something from a forgotten time. Mixed in with it was laughter. Genuine, happy laughter. I slowed my steps and looked toward the field. There were lights strung up between the tents, flickering warm gold and red. I could see carnival booths lined up along the edges, ring toss, dart games, even a prize wheel. A couple of kids were holding cotton candy taller than their heads, and I swear I saw someone win a giant stuffed bear and hug it like it was real. But what Hank said kept rattling around in my mind. I walked past the edge of the grounds, keeping my eyes on the glowing tents, trying to figure out what it was that felt wrong. The laughter seemed real, the booths looked legit. But then it hit me. That smell. It wasn't strong, not enough to notice right away. But underneath the sweetness of popcorn and sugar, something sour lingered. Something rotting. It crawled into my nose and stayed there. I turned the corner, trying to shake it off, and saw my house up ahead. Porch light still on, just like I'd left it. But when I stepped onto the top stair, I saw it. A red envelope. It was thick. The kind of paper you'd use for a wedding invitation or a secret society. My name was written on the front in black ink. Maya Sanders. Not printed. Handwritten. And I didn't recognize the handwriting. My stomach sank a little, but I opened it anyway. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper. The letter was short and weirdly formal. Dear Maya Sanders, we invite you to the Midnight Carnival. One night only. That was it. Tucked behind the letter was a ticket. It was old-fashioned, gold edges, deep red lettering, and glossy paper that looked almost too expensive for a free town event. And right there on the front, in bold print, was my name. Maya Sanders. In the corner, in barely noticeable letters, were 2 words. Not transferable. I sat down at the kitchen table and stared at it, rereading the note, turning the ticket over in my hands. Who writes people's names on circus tickets? Did everyone get one of these? And if so, how? Why? There was no price, no schedule, no details at all. Just an invitation. Just my name. Part of me wanted to rip it in half and toss it. Another part was curious. It was Friday night. The bakery was closed for the weekend. I didn't have plans. And if I'm being honest, I wanted to know what the hell was going on. So I got up, changed into jeans, threw on a light jacket, checked the time, 8:30 p.m. The ticket said Midnight Carnival. Maybe I'd just stop by for a bit, try some food, ask around, see who else got a fancy letter hand-delivered to their porch. I left the house around 8:30, ticket tucked in my jacket pocket and my phone in hand, mostly to look like I had a reason to be out wandering in the dark. The wind had picked up a little, but the night was clear. Quiet. That kind of small-town quiet where even your footsteps feel too loud on the pavement. I could already see the glow from the circus tents in the distance. The same deep red and flickering gold I'd seen earlier, bright enough to spill over the trees and rooftops. The music was still playing, that same looping tune that sounded like it came from an old dusty record player someone forgot to turn off. I passed the gas station, crossed the edge of the gravel lot, and stepped onto the carnival grounds. That's when I realized people were actually there. Not a huge crowd, but enough to make it feel real. I spotted a few familiar faces right away. Mr. Callahan from the post office, Janice from the pharmacy, and a group of teenagers I usually caught hanging around the back of the diner on Friday nights. They were all milling about like this was just a normal local event. Like it wasn't strange that none of them had heard about it until today. Kids were running around with cotton candy. Someone let out a cheer near the ring toss booth. A couple was sharing a bag of kettle corn under a glowing string of lights, and through all of it, the music just kept looping, soft and catchy, tugging at something in the back of my brain. It looked normal, or it tried to, because almost immediately I smelled it again. The rot. Faint, just under the sugar and salt and grilled meat, but it was there. I paused and looked around, but no one else seemed to notice. They kept walking, laughing, playing. I saw a kid drop a stuffed animal and another run up and hand it back like this was any other Friday night fare. I tried to brush it off. Maybe the food stand had tossed bad meat in a trash bin too close to the open air. Maybe I was just overly sensitive from baking all day. My stomach growled, and I realized I hadn't eaten since lunch. I figured a hot dog wouldn't hurt. There was a stand nearby, small and old-fashioned, with a flickering sign above it that just said hot dogs in faded red letters. The man behind the counter looked a little stiff, mid-50s maybe, with a blank face and thin gloves pulled tight around his hands. He didn't say a word when I walked up. "One hot dog," I said. "Just ketchup." He nodded, turned around, and quickly wrapped something in wax paper. I handed over a couple crumpled bills and took the hot dog without thinking. I didn't even get the paper halfway open before the smell hit me. Not the soft rot I'd noticed before. This was different, immediate, strong. The hot dog reeked. It was sour, pungent, and rotten, like spoiled meat left out for days in the sun. My stomach turned. I pulled it back from my face and held it away from me, then looked up. The man behind the stand was gone. The booth was empty. I blinked, confused, and looked around. Maybe he stepped away for a second? Maybe he had to grab something? I waited, holding the hot dog at arm's length like it might grow legs and bite me. A few minutes passed. Still no one. Just as I was about to walk away, I heard voices behind me. A group of people had walked up to the booth, laughing and chatting like they didn't see me standing there. I turned back, and there he was. The same vendor. Standing exactly where he'd been before. Only now, he was smiling. Wide. Too wide. His teeth were blackened and broken, gums receding in spots as if they'd started to rot out of his skull. His skin looked wrong, too. Grayish, dry, flaking near the corners of his mouth. His gloves were gone, and I could see his hands. They looked brittle, the veins dark and raised like old wires under dead bark. We locked eyes. Then I blinked, and everything was normal again. His teeth were straight and white. He wore clean gloves. The dead, dry skin was gone. He looked like a regular guy handing out hot dogs at a local carnival. He nodded politely at the customer in front of him, like he hadn't just been falling apart a second ago. My heart was racing. I dropped the hot dog into the nearest trash can and walked away without another word. I tried to calm myself down, tell myself I was tired, or that the lights were playing tricks on me. But the deeper I walked into the carnival, the more things started to feel wrong. Every time I turned my head too fast or caught something out of the corner of my eye, I'd see something that didn't belong. A game attendant with one eye, the other socket sunken and black. A woman spinning cotton candy with no fingers, just soft, rounded stumps gripping the stick like it was second nature. A clown with a face painted too thickly, cracks in the makeup revealing rotting skin underneath. But every time I looked again, really looked, they appeared normal. I started to feel dizzy, like I was the only one seeing it, like everyone else was under some kind of spell. Or worse, like maybe I was the one slipping. That's when I saw Miss Hoover again. She was standing by one of the balloon-popping booths, holding the hand of a little girl with long brown hair. I figured it had to be her granddaughter. I walked up, trying to steady my voice. "Hi, Miss Hoover," I said. She turned with a bright smile. "Oh, Maya, I'm glad you came out. This is my granddaughter, Ellie. Isn't this exciting?" I nodded, then looked down at the little girl. She was holding a red and white tin, the kind they use for caramel popcorn at Christmas. Only it wasn't popcorn inside. It was bugs. I froze. The tin was filled to the brim with slick, black beetles crawling and twitching over each other. Their shiny backs clacked together. I saw legs, antennae, wings flapping in the mix. The smell coming off it was strong, earthy, wet, putrid. I didn't even think. I reached out and slapped the tin from her hands. It hit the ground with a clang, and the contents spilled across the dirt. Miss Hoover gasped and yanked Ellie close, shielding her. "Maya, what on earth are you doing?" "I'm sorry," I stammered. "I didn't mean to scare her. I thought I saw something." I looked at the ground. Popcorn, just normal buttery popcorn scattered across the grass. Hoover's face changed. From surprise to discomfort, her smile dropped, her eyes narrowed. "Maybe you should head home," she said. "You don't look well." She took Ellie's hand and walked off, glancing back at me once before disappearing into the crowd. I stood there, stunned, staring at the popcorn on the ground. It wasn't moving. Then one kernel twitched. I watched another roll slightly to the side even though there was no wind. A third shifted on its own, just barely. Just enough to make my stomach drop. I stepped back. I needed to leave. That was when I heard it. "Maya?" The voice came from just behind me. I turned. There was a man standing a few feet away, dressed in a tall black top hat and a tailored red coat. He held a long black walking stick, the kind with a curved handle like something from an old movie. His clothes were too clean, too perfect. He wasn't really part of this world. He smiled politely. "Hi," he said. "I'm Steven, the showmaster." I blinked. Yes? How do you?" He cut me off with a nod. "I hope you received the ticket?" My hand moved without me thinking. I reached into my jacket and pulled it out, holding it up between two fingers. Steven's eyes flicked down to it, and his smile widened. "Well," he said softly, "we're going to be waiting for you." Before I could speak, the wind kicked up, sharp and sudden. The ticket flew from my hand and tumbled across the grass behind me. I turned to chase it, just a second, maybe two. When I looked back, he was gone. I looked around the carnival, heart pounding. unsure what I was even looking for. And that's when I noticed the line forming, a slow, quiet trickle of people heading toward the main tent. No one spoke, no one laughed. They moved like they were being pulled by something invisible. I looked down at my phone. 11:45 p.m. 15 minutes to midnight. That was the moment. The last real chance I had to leave. To run home, lock the doors, and never look back. But I didn't. Instead, I walked toward the tent and stood at the very end of the line. No one talked, no one laughed. There was no excited chatter or phones held up for selfies. Just slow, steady steps toward the entrance of the tent. The closer we got, the bigger it seemed. From a distance, the red and gold stripes had looked festive, even inviting. Up close, the fabric looked old, worn at the seams, like it had been stitched and restitched 1,000 times. There were symbols drawn in black near the edges, some I didn't recognize. Curves and spirals that reminded me of burned-in brands. And the smell, it was stronger now. Under the layers of roasted peanuts, sweet candy, and oil-fried dough, the rot had crept back in. The kind of stench that clings to your throat and coats your tongue. The line moved forward. One by one, people handed over their tickets to a figure standing at the tent entrance. At first, I thought it was just another clown. He wore the costume, sure. Oversized shoes, a polka-dotted suit, pale makeup with a red smile painted wide across his face. But then I looked closer. His eyes didn't blink, his mouth didn't move. And his smile, it wasn't painted, it was real. Rotten teeth peeked out from cracked lips, gums blackened like they were dipped in tar. His eyes were wide and glassy, staring straight ahead, never shifting. His skin looked powdery and stretched tight, like it had been pulled over bone and forgotten. And somehow no one noticed. The woman in front of me smiled at him as she handed over her ticket. He took it with slow, mechanical fingers, nodded once, then parted the curtain for her. She stepped inside without hesitation. Then it was my turn. He was already staring at me, like he'd been waiting. I held out my ticket, trying to keep my hand from shaking. He reached forward and took it carefully, almost reverently. He looked it over, once, twice, then folded it and slipped it into the pocket of his coat. He didn't speak, he didn't gesture. He simply turned, reached for the curtain, and pulled it open. I couldn't see anything past it, just pure black. No lights, no shadows, no hint of a stage or a crowd, just darkness. I should have turned around, I should have walked away, but I didn't. I stepped through the curtain, and everything changed. The moment I passed through, it was like walking into another world. The air grew heavy and still. The sound from outside vanished completely. No music, no wind, no murmurs of the crowd. I was inside the tent. It was enormous, far bigger than it looked from the outside. The ceiling stretched high above me, covered in dark red fabric that swayed gently, like it was breathing. Rows and rows of chairs circled the central ring, all facing inward. Spotlights were attached to the frame, but none of them were on, and the seats? Empty. Every single one. I turned in a slow circle, trying to find someone, anyone, but there was no one else inside. Just me. And the silent ring in the middle. I walked backward toward the entrance, reaching for the curtain. Only it wasn't there. The spot where I had entered was now sealed shut. A wall of fabric stretched smooth and solid across the space, with no break, no fold, no opening. I pressed my hand against it. It didn't move. It didn't feel like fabric anymore. It was cold, hard, like whatever it was had been sewn into the earth, like the tent had closed its mouth around me and locked its jaw. Panic started rising in my chest. I turned back toward the ring just as a spotlight snapped on, blasting white light straight into my eyes. I shielded my face with one hand, blinking hard against it. Then a voice came through the speakers. Calm, smooth, familiar. "Maya Sanders," it said. "Welcome to the Midnight Carnival, one night only." The voice echoed in the empty space, bouncing off the tent walls like it had nowhere else to go. Before I could move, something grabbed my arm. I gasped and turned, but I couldn't see them. Just the feeling of fingers wrapping firmly around my sleeve. Their grip was cold. Unnaturally cold. They didn't yank or shove. They simply guided me forward, slow and steady, until I reached the front row. One of the chairs waited for me. Plush, red, old-looking but spotless. I didn't want to sit. Every part of my body was screaming not to. But I sat, my knees bent without me telling them to. My hands gripped the arms of the chair, white-knuckled and frozen. The spotlight moved off me and glided toward the center of the ring, and standing there, smiling like he'd just been waiting for the cue, was Steven. The showmaster. Same red coat, same black top hat, same black walking stick gripped in one hand. He looked directly at me, not around, not at a crowd, at me, like I was the only person that mattered. His voice filled the tent again, this time without the speakers. "We are so glad you were able to come tonight, Maya." I wanted to scream, but my throat stayed shut. Steven smiled wider. Then the lights dimmed, the music changed, and the show began. The spotlight over the ring flickered for a second, then steadied. The music was still going, but it had changed. Slower now, almost dragging, warped like an old record that didn't want to spin properly. Every note made my teeth clench. From behind one of the curtains at the edge of the ring, a clown stepped out. He was short, hunched over slightly, with oversized shoes that scraped against the dirt. His costume looked handmade, stitched together with mismatched patches and buttons that didn't match. His painted smile stretched too far, curling up toward his eyes, and his red nose looked more like bruised skin than rubber. In one hand, he held a single balloon. Red, fully inflated. He stepped to the center, paused, and bowed. He began twisting the balloon. It squeaked with every movement, the rubber straining under his fingers. He shaped it slowly. First a long neck, then short legs, then a tail. At first I thought it was supposed to be a dog, maybe a giraffe, but the proportions were off. The head was too small. The neck curved down instead of up. Then he popped it, on purpose. Just squeezed until it burst between his hands. The noise made me jump. He pulled another balloon from his pocket, yellow this time, and blew it up. As soon as he tried to twist it, it popped too. He stared at the shredded pieces in his hand, tilted his head and pulled out a third. Green. This one he handled carefully. He twisted it into one long loop, then another crossing over it. A third curve, tight at the top. I stared at it, confused. Then I saw what it was, a looped rope used for hanging. He tied the bottom and turned to face me. Then he started walking. I wanted to stand, I wanted to back away, but my body was locked. My muscles were stiff. All I could do was watch as he approached, step by step, dragging those massive shoes across the ground. He stopped in front of me and held it out. The balloon noose, looped and perfect, stretched toward my hand. I didn't want to touch it, but my hand moved anyway. The moment my fingers made contact, it popped. Not with air, not with a bang, but with liquid, red, thick, sticky. It splashed across my chest, soaked into my jacket, splattered my face. I screamed before I even realized it, high and sharp and desperate. The clown let out a horrible, raspy laugh, like someone trying to breathe through a throat full of gravel. He doubled over, wheezing, holding his stomach as he laughed harder. I stared at him, shaking, heart racing. The red liquid dripped down my hands, hot and real and unmistakable. He turned and shuffled off the stage, still laughing. The lights dimmed again. Then something else came out. A dog. At least, I think it had once been a dog. It stumbled into the ring slowly, dragging one of its back legs behind it. The limb wasn't fully attached, just strips of skin holding it in place. Every step made it swing back and forth, leaving a smear of blood behind. Its fur was dirty and matted, and there were open wounds across its ribs and neck. It limped toward a red stool in the center and sat down, wobbling. Another figure stepped out. Tall, thin, no face paint, just a long coat and black gloves. He raised one of the dog's paws high, like presenting it to the crowd. Then the clown returned, only this time, he was holding a gun. Not fake, not plastic. He walked to the center, aimed the gun at the dog's head, and pulled the trigger. The sound shattered the silence. The dog crumpled instantly, sliding off the stool like a rag doll. Blood began pooling beneath it, soaking into the dirt. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The clown bowed again, then grabbed the dog's ruined leg and dragged it off stage, like it was part of the act. I sat there, shaking, arms glued to the chair, the red from the balloon still clinging to my jacket. My mouth was dry. My face was wet with tears I hadn't even noticed falling. Then more came. Performers, creatures, things that didn't even look human anymore. They sliced themselves open, pulled teeth from their mouths, cracked joints backward. One girl climbed a ladder and jumped into a barrel full of broken glass. Another ate something alive. It screamed the whole time, but no one stopped her. They bled, they cried, they smiled, and every time I looked up, they were all staring at me. Only me. Like I was the only thing that mattered. I tried again to stand, to scream, to move. Anything. But my body wouldn't respond. My legs felt like they were full of cement. My hands were still gripping the arms of the chair so tightly I couldn't feel my fingers. Then the music stopped. Silence fell over the tent again. And Steven walked back into the ring. "Are you enjoying the show, Maya?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. He nodded, as if that was fine. "For our final act," he said, "we're bringing out something special." From behind the curtains, a horse entered. Or something shaped like a horse. Its ribs stuck out like cage bars. One of its eyes was missing, the socket a sunken pit. Its mane was patchy, the hair falling out in tufts as it walked. It pulled a cart behind it, wheels creaking with every rotation. And on that cart was a dunk tank. The kind you see at carnivals, with a wooden bench and a big target on the side. Only this one wasn't filled with water. The tank was empty. At the bottom were jagged metal spikes, rusted, pointed. My breath caught in my throat. Two figures came from behind. I didn't see their faces, just long coats, cold hands. They grabbed me, lifted me, pulled me from the seat. I tried to fight, I swear I did, but my limbs were heavy like I'd been drugged. I kicked, thrashed, but nothing mattered. They dragged me up the wooden stairs to the tank and forced me down onto the seat. They tied my wrists, my ankles, tight. The spikes glinted below me. Steven turned to the crowd. Only now I saw them. The seats weren't empty anymore. Every performer, every twisted creature, everything that had walked that stage, they were now seated in the audience. Silent, watching, and they were dead. All of them. Faces sunken, flesh missing, skin gray and sagging. Some had no eyes, some had no lips, just teeth and bone. The whole tent smelled like rot and death and blood. Steven lifted his arms high. "Let's give Maya the send-off she deserves. Who wants to play?" They laughed. The whole crowd burst into joy, shoving each other, lining up eagerly. One clown carried a bucket filled with water balloons. He handed the first one to the clown who'd shot the dog. He threw it. It missed. Another clown stepped up, threw, missed again. One by one, they laughed and threw and missed, every balloon just barely veering off target. But none of them looked frustrated. They were enjoying it, enjoying watching me squirm, cry, beg without words. Then Steven stepped forward. He reached into the bucket and pulled out a single red balloon. He looked right at me, smiled. "Well," he said, "this has dragged on long enough, hasn't it? We need a grand finale." He turned and threw it. The balloon hit the target dead center. I heard a loud click. The hook released. The seat tilted, and I dropped. Everything went black. I woke up with a gasp so sharp it hurt my throat. My whole body jerked forward like I'd been jolted with electricity. For a second, I couldn't breathe. My chest ached, my ribs burned, and I was choking on nothing. I was in my bed, my actual bed, in my house. The blankets were twisted around me, soaked in sweat. My pillow had fallen on the floor. The room was dark, quiet, too quiet. No carnival music, no lights, no screams, no smell of rot. Just stillness. I stayed frozen, sitting up, heart pounding like it wanted to tear through my chest. My first thought, the only one that made sense, was that I'd passed out. Maybe I'd hit my head. Maybe the stress, the rotten hot dog, the weird lights. Maybe I'd hallucinated everything. My mind had gone into overdrive and built an entire nightmare out of nothing. But then I looked down. My hands were covered in blood. Not a few smears, not a trickle, covered. It was dried in some places, still tacky in others. Thick streaks ran up my forearms. My shirt, same one I'd worn to the carnival, was soaked. Splashes of deep red across the front, smears around the sleeves, like something had exploded near me and I'd been too close. It looked real. It smelled real. And there was no pain, no wounds. None of it was mine. I scrambled out of bed, nearly falling, and rushed to the bathroom. My bare feet stuck slightly to the floor with each step. I flipped the light switch and stared into the mirror. That's when I stopped breathing. Blood was on my face, dotting my forehead, across my cheekbones, drying in dark lines on my neck like it had dripped from above. There were spots in my hair, behind my ear, across my collarbone. My eyes looked hollow, red-rimmed, distant, like I hadn't slept in days. I touched my cheek slowly. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't a hallucination. I had been there. I stepped back from the mirror and reached into my jacket pocket. My fingers brushed against something soft, something thin and slightly damp. I pulled it out, a torn piece of green balloon. Just rubber, twisted and shredded, but unmistakable. The one the clown had handed me. The one that popped in my hands. The one that had soaked me in fake blood. Only it hadn't been fake. I dropped it on the counter and turned away. My stomach twisted, my chest ached, but I couldn't cry. I'd cried already. I had nothing left. I needed to see it. I needed to know. I went to the front door, still barefoot, still wearing blood-stained clothes, and pulled it open. That's when I stepped on something. There was a faint crunch under my heel. I looked down, heart already sinking. A red envelope, just like before. Same thick paper, same black ink. No address, no stamp, just my name. My hands shook as I bent down and picked it up. Inside was another letter. Dear Maya, we are so glad you were at our special show last night. We hope you enjoyed it. Until next time, Stephen. My knees nearly gave out. I stood there in the doorway, holding the envelope, reading the words over and over again. The air was still cool. The neighborhood was quiet. No one else was awake. I couldn't take it. I ran. I didn't stop to grab shoes. I didn't stop to lock the door. I just ran as fast as I could, heart slamming against my ribs with every step. I didn't care how I looked. I didn't care what time it was. I ran to the edge of town, to the field, to where the circus had been. But when I got there, it was gone. All of it. The tents, the booths, the lights, the music, the smell, gone. The grass was undisturbed. There were no footprints, no tire tracks, not even a stray popcorn kernel or scrap of paper. It looked like no one had been there at all. I stood in the middle of the empty field, gasping, blood drying on my skin. No one would believe me, no one would understand. But I knew. The Midnight Carnival had come to town, and it had disappeared after just one night.